Alright, what's up guys? In today's video, we will be discussing why you shouldn't take steroids. So, two observations, or two events rather, that occurred prompted me to make this video. One, on social media, there's been a lot of talk about steroids, and steroids are growing in popularity, especially amongst younger people, this new generation of adults who have low attention spans, who don't have a work ethic, who want everything now, who want instant gratification, and that's a consequence of a lot of things. And one of the primary consequences is due to smartphones and like Chat GPT. People don't have patience or attention spans. They want everything now. They want everything as quickly as possible, and as a consequence, people, especially teenagers and young adults, 18, 19, 20 years old, have begun taking steroids to get muscle more quickly. Okay, and that's very, very problematic. It's extremely problematic. Okay. In addition, people have begun taking, appetite suppressants such as Ozempic, which is used, I believe, for diabetes or something, and Retta, which is like a peptide or a drug rather that's really bad for you, something you shouldn't take. And we're going to discuss why you shouldn't take steroids. And the other event that occurred was there's this guy I met at the gym. He had a really good physique. I went up and talked to him. We got to talking, we got to talking, we got to talking. I assumed this guy was natural. He just had a really nice physique. It was nice enough for me to go up and talk to him. I went up and talked to him. He's like, "Yeah, I'm on test. I take tests." And I'm like, "Wow, I assumed you were natural." And so you have people on steroids who I had this guy who was on steroids who looked totally natural. I'm like, "Wow, you should not be on steroids." But anyways, number one, most influencers on steroids look natural. Okay, there are lots of people influencers I've observed on social media who are on steroids, who have come out and said that they're on steroids, who look totally natural, and I'm comparing them to myself and other natural bodybuilders I know. Okay, and the reason most influencers are on steroids, the reason most influencers on steroids look natural is twofold. One, they're not optimizing their training. Now, what does that mean? They're not optimizing their training. They're not training properly. Now, what does that mean? It means they haven't learned how to properly bodybuild. What does that mean? It means they haven't learned how to properly contract their muscles prior to starting steroids. Because there's no reason for you, a 19, 20, 21 year old, to look natural while you're blasting test, while you're blasting trin, while you're blasting growth hormone, TRT, whatever, okay? If you're on steroids and you still look natural, that means you're not optimizing training. So you have guys on steroids who look worse than me, a natural, who's not, because they haven't optimized their training. They haven't learned how to properly contract their muscles. They haven't learned how to properly bodybuild, okay? And step two, they haven't optimized their diet, okay? A lot of guys on steroids, they're getting maybe a quarter, if that, maybe a fifth or an eighth of the gains they could be getting when you're blasting like 500 milligrams of test a week. They're getting a fifth of the gains they could possibly getting because they're not optimizing their diet. What does that mean? They're either not eating enough protein or they're not eating enough calories. Okay, so you're injecting steroids into your body. Steroids age you. They make you die quicker, and they're really bad for your heart and lungs, or excuse me, heart and liver. Okay, terrible for your liver, really bad for your heart. Makes it hard to breathe. And the point of steroids is to get as big as possible, right? But if you're not optimizing your training and you're not optimizing your diet, which means they're leaving gains on the table. So if you're on steroids and you can't optimize your diet, you can't optimize your training, you're wasting time. You're just literally injecting yourself with poison. You're literally you're reducing the length of that you will live because you want to get gains a little faster, but you're not getting gains faster. And you're definitely not getting gains at the rate you could be, right? So if you're going to take steroids, you need to optimize your training and optimize your diet. But most of these influencers who are on steroids don't do that, so they look natural. They look worse than me. And I've been accused of being on steroids since April of 2019, okay? And the reason so I was accused of being on steroids 16 months into training. That's because I put 25 pounds of muscle on in 16 months. And I did that because I dedicated a lot of time to bodybuilding, and I dedicated a lot of time to learning how to properly train, and my nutrition was always on point, okay? Two, you shouldn't take steroids because you might have extremely good genetics. Okay, like I said, people have accused me of being on steroids since April of 2019. Every time I post a video, people accuse me of being on steroids. Every time I post on a Reddit forum, people accuse me of being on steroids. They say, "Oh, he's clearly on steroids. He's clearly on the juice. He can't be natural." I'm as natural as it gets. I weigh 180 pounds at 5'10", and I've been trained bodybuilding for 8 years. Okay, so I have extremely good genetics. Okay, but here's the thing: you might have extremely good genetics. However, it takes 1.5 to 2 years of proper training and proper eating to know if you have good genetics. Okay, so like in order to know if you have good genetics, you have to know how to properly train. You need to know how to properly contract all of your muscles. And if you're a beginner who's figuring all of this stuff out on their own, who doesn't have a coach or guidance to tell them how to do everything perfectly, it's going to take you time to figure out how to do everything correctly. It's going to take a very long time. All right. So it takes 1.5 to 2 years of proper training to know if you have good genetics. I would argue that if you're figuring this stuff out on your own, it'll probably take 1.5 years to learn how to properly train, if not more, right? Because there's going to be a point where you don't realize you're training certain muscles wrong. Then there's going to be a point to where you neglected to train certain muscles, and then there's going to be a point to where you thought you were training certain muscles right, but you're actually training them wrong. Okay. And not only that, most people who train aren't eating enough protein or calories. That's why I've been going to the gym for 8 years. There's a handful of guys who look exactly the same after 8 years. That's because their diet's terrible. They're not eating enough protein or calories. In order to gain muscle, your nutrition has to be on point, your lifting has to be on point, your hydration has to be on point, your sleep has to be on point. Building muscle is hard, okay? And if you're not building muscle, which most people who aren't, they're not eating enough protein or eating enough calories. You need to be eating a minimum of 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, and you need to be eating in a caloric surplus. Okay, I recommend eating 1.25 grams of protein per pound of body weight, but at a minimum, you need to be eating 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. That can get hard, especially when you don't want or don't feel like eating. Okay, but you have to do it. All right. So you might have extremely good genetics, but you're not eating enough protein. You're not consuming enough calories, meaning you're not eating above maintenance calories. And it takes 1.5 to 2 years of proper training to know if you have good genetics. So honestly, I would add, 1.5 years to learn to figure it out. So it might take 3 to 3.5 years to know if you have good genetics. So you could have super good genetics to the point to where people like me, to the point to where people accuse you of being on steroids, right? And finally, the obvious health issues. Everyone knows that when you're on steroids, everyone can watch a video of someone on steroids trying to do cardio or walk up the stairs and they're out of breath. People on steroids who get out of breath just talking. You have a harder time doing cardio. It's bad for your lungs. It's bad for your health. Listen. You can get very strong naturally. And ultimately it all depends on your genetics. But you can't blame your genetics until you've exhausted until you're certain that you know how to train properly, which takes years. Okay, until you're certain that you're eating enough protein and you're certain that you've eaten a caloric surplus for years. This stuff takes years. Okay, and it's not worth having short-term gains for the obvious health issues you're gonna have in the future. Okay, like I'm 29 years old. I will be 29 years old in 3 weeks. Okay, people regularly assume I'm anywhere from 18 to 22. I graduated college 6 years ago, and people still think I'm in college. People think I'm a fucking kid. When I tell people that I'm an engineer, they assume that I'm still in school despite graduating 6 years ago. That's because I take care of myself. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. If I drank or did drugs, I would age. I would age rapidly and a long time ago. Okay, people on steroids age, and you don't want to age. And above all, you don't want to have health issues. You don't want to have lung issues. If you abuse oral steroids, you'll have liver issues. If you blast injectable steroids, you can have heart issues, right? So it's not worth it. It is not worth it at all, and you'll lose most of your gains once you come off of it inevitably. And so pretty much what you have is you shouldn't take steroids because. And before I say that, I've been bodybuilding for 8 years. The journey has been the fun part. Okay, the journey has been the fun part, right? Like, had I had this physique without having to work for it, I would not be the person I am today. I've had to do so much difficult stuff. I've had to train when I haven't wanted to. When I haven't wanted to, for the first 2 years of training, I didn't have a car because I was in college, and so I had to run 2.2 miles to the gym, and I had to run 2.2 miles home each day for 6 days a week for 2 years. Do you know how much in all types of weather, whether it was raining, extremely hot, snowing, extremely cold, okay? Do you know how much discipline and mental fortitude that built up? Do you know how much discipline and mental fortitude gets built. Having to go to the gym when you don't want to, and training when you're tired, fatigued, and you don't want to. You know how much mental fortitude and discipline gets built up when you eat 6 meals a day, when you eat every 2.5 hours, when you're eating high protein foods, and when you're eating foods that you don't want to eat. Do you know how much discipline and mental fortitude gets built up when you're doing all the stuff that you don't want to do? When how much discipline and mental fortitude gets built up when you're stuffing your face with food because you need to eat 1,000 calories, but you need to go to bed in 30 minutes. Okay, like the journey was the fun part. All the people I've met along the way, all the discipline I developed along the way, all the confidence I've developed all the way. I now my mindset now, I know I can literally accomplish anything, and I largely attribute that to all the years I've spent grinding in the gym. Okay, so yes, you getting the physique is great, the end result is great. Okay, but cheating, I'll just call it what it is, cheating and taking the shortcut, you're not going to be nearly as tough as someone who stuck it out and did it the hard way. Okay, that's just period, point blank. And if y'all are interested, that's all. If y'all are interested, I offer coaching. Link in the bio. How to bodybuild, how to get jacked, how to get shredded, how to bodybuild and run concurrently. But that's all I've got for you guys today. If y'all are interested, drop a like, subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.